Poor genius girl stood up to the teacher, who tried to humiliate her and silence the entire school. Professor Julian Vance slammed his fist on the desk as he watched the only scholarship student in his advanced mathematics class at St. Jude's Preparatory, one of the most expensive private schools in Chicago. Maya Collins, just 15 years old, had just questioned one of his calculations on the board, and it felt like a slap in the face to a man who considered himself untouchable. "Miss Collins, do you really think you can correct a teacher with a master's degree?" he said, with a sarcastic smile that made the whole class turn to look at her. Maya adjusted her glasses, held together with tape on the right side, and swallowed hard. Her fingers trembled slightly as she held the worn-down pencil her mother had given her at the start of the school year. "Professor, I didn't mean to correct you. It's just that you wrote that the derivative of x squared is x, but it's actually 2x, she said softly, trying not to sound disrespectful. The silence that fell over the room was sharp. 27 students looked between Maya and the professor, as if watching a duel. Julian felt his face grow hot. After 15 years teaching at that school, he had never been questioned by a student, much less by that girl in a faded uniform and worn-out shoes. "Very interesting," he said, walking slowly to her desk. "You must have studied a lot at home, haven't you? I imagine you have expensive books, a computer with internet, maybe even private tutors." A few classmates chuckled softly. Maya felt her cheeks burn. Everyone there knew she was different. While they arrived at school in imported cars, she came on foot, walking an hour and a half from the low-income housing project where she lived with her mother. "No, sir. I study with the books from the school library," she replied, keeping her voice steady despite her nervousness. "Ah, of course. And where exactly did you learn about derivatives? Because that topic is only covered in the senior year, and you're a freshman." Julian crossed his arms, challenging her. Maya took a deep breath. She knew she was entering dangerous territory, but she couldn't stay quiet when she saw something wrong being taught. "My grandma taught me. She was a math teacher before she retired." The laughter that echoed through the room came mainly from Parker Huntington, the son of a local businessman, sitting in the front row. "Guys, she wants to teach Professor Vance," he whispered loud enough for everyone to hear. "I bet her grandma didn't even finish middle school." Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now, continuing. "Mr. Huntington is right," said Julian, turning back to the board. "Miss Collins, you need to understand something very important. There is a hierarchy here. I have a master's from Midwest State University. You have good intentions, I suppose." He erased the board and wrote a new equation, this time deliberately more complex. "Since you think you're so clever, why don't you solve this up here?" He pointed to an integral that would normally only be seen in college. Maya looked at the problem. Her heart raced, not from fear, but from excitement. She had seen something similar in one of the old math books her grandma Martha kept at home. "I can try," she said, standing up slowly. No, Julian waved his hand. "Go back to your seat. I won't allow you to embarrass yourself in front of your classmates. People like you, well, it's better not to humiliate yourselves trying to understand concepts that are beyond your reality." Julian's words echoed through the room like stones. Maya felt each one like a punch to the gut. She knew he wasn't just talking about math. He was talking about her origin, her social condition, her place in the world. "Excuse me, Professor," a firm voice came from the door. Everyone turned to see Martha Collins, a 68-year-old woman with graying hair tied in a simple bun, wearing a navy blue cardigan that had seen better days. She carried a cloth bag where she kept the books she still read daily. "Grandma?" Maya whispered, surprised. "Sorry to interrupt your class, Professor. I'm Martha Collins, Maya's grandmother. I came to pick her up because we had a problem at home." Julian looked the woman up and down, noticing her simple shoes and the cardigan patched at the elbow. "Of course, ma'am. You may take your granddaughter. But first, she wanted to solve a problem on the board. Perhaps you could convince her that this isn't suitable for people like you." Martha walked slowly to the board, her eyes lighting up when she saw the integral. Interesting. A trigonometric substitution integral, she murmured more to herself. Pardon? Julian asked, confused. Nothing, Professor. I was just observing that you wrote an integral that can be solved using u substitution with u Born's 2x, but it can also be solved using trigonometric substitution with x forms tangent of theta over 2. Julian's jaw nearly hit the floor. He looked at the board, then at the simple woman before him, then back at the board. You studied mathematics? 35 years teaching, Martha replied simply. I graduated in 1978 from the same university where you got your master's, if I'm not mistaken. The silence in the room was now absolute. Even Parker had stopped laughing. Maya, my dear, why don't you show your classmates how we solved this problem at home last night? Maya looked at her grandmother, then at the professor, who now seemed to have swallowed his tongue. May I, Professor? Julian merely nodded, still processing what he had just heard. Maya walked to the board and began to write. Her movements were precise, confident. With each line she wrote, her posture straightened a little more. First, we'll use the substitution u chakarix, so do sharperu 2dex, she explained as she wrote. This transforms our integral into something simpler. She continued developing the calculation step by step, explaining each move with a clarity that not even Julian could achieve when he taught his classes. And here we arrive at the final result, she said, writing the answer. The entire class was mesmerized. Not even Julian could take his eyes off the board. Very good, dear, Martha said, placing a hand on her granddaughter's shoulder. Now let's go home. Before they left, she turned to Julian. Professor, I hope you understand that knowledge has no social class. My granddaughter is brilliant, and it would be a shame if someone tried to dim that light out of prejudice. After they left, the room remained silent for long minutes. Julian pretended to consult his papers, but he was actually trying to process what had happened. How did that poor girl know how to solve a problem he himself would have difficulty explaining? Parker broke the silence. Professor, did Maya really get it right? Julian checked the calculations on the board. Everything was correct, every step, every substitution, every simplification. Yes, he admitted reluctantly. She got it right. The next day, Maya arrived at school earlier than normal. She wanted to avoid the curious looks from her classmates after what had happened. She sat at her usual desk in the last row and opened the literature book she had borrowed from the library. Look who's here, Julian's voice cut through the silence of the empty room. The little genius. He carried a stack of papers and had an expression Maya couldn't decipher. Professor, I didn't mean to cause trouble yesterday. I just what? Just wanted to humiliate me in front of the students. He approached her desk. You think you're very clever, don't you? Maya didn't answer. There was something different in his tone, something more dangerous than the irritation from the day before. I prepared a special little quiz just for you. He placed a sheet on her desk. Since you think you're so smart, let's see how you do with real questions. Maya looked at the paper. The questions were clearly college level. Differential and integral calculus, linear algebra, real analysis. Things she had studied with her grandmother, but never imagined she'd see on a high school test. Professor, these questions are too advanced for freshman year. For normal people, yes. But you're not normal, are you? Yesterday you solved an integral my seniors wouldn't even know where to begin. The other students began to enter the room. Carolina Mendez, a judge's daughter, looked curiously at the sheet on Maya's desk. Wow, what test is that? She asked. A special assessment for our classmate here, Julian said loudly enough for the whole class to hear. After all, if she's as brilliant as she appears, she shouldn't have any problems. Maya understood what was happening. It was a trap. If she couldn't solve it, it would prove yesterday was a fluke. If she could, he'd find another way to belittle her. How much time do I have? She asked quietly. The same as your classmates will have for their regular test, 50 minutes. While Julian distributed a completely different test to the rest of the class, Maya began to read each question carefully. Her hands trembled slightly, but not from fear. It was pure adrenaline. The first question asked to calculate the limit of a rational function as x approached infinity. Maya smiled inwardly. Her grandmother had taught her that concept 2 months ago. She began to write, completely blocking out the noise around her. It was as if the world had disappeared and there was only her, the pencil and the paper. 40 minutes later, when her classmates were still halfway through their tests, Maya raised her hand. "I'm finished, Professor." Julian looked at her with disbelief. "Impossible, check your answers." "I already checked 3 times. He took the test and flipped through it quickly. Every question was solved in detail. Every calculation was correct. Every line of reasoning was clearly explained. "You cheated," he said without blinking. "How could I have cheated? You said yourself you prepared these questions especially for me. You memorized them from somewhere. No one solves differential calculus in their head in 40 minutes. Maya felt the blood rush to her face. "Professor, I can solve any question you want, in front of the whole class, to prove I didn't memorize anything." "That won't be necessary." He tore the test in half in front of everyone. "I know when a student is cheating." The sound of the paper tearing echoed through the room like a gunshot. All the students stopped what they were doing to look. "But Professor," Carolina said, "if she cheated, how did she cheat on a test only she got?" "Clever girls always find a way," Julian replied curtly. "And some people think they can outsmart someone with years of experience." Maya felt tears burning her eyes but didn't let them fall. Not there, not in front of everyone. "May I go to the restroom?" she asked, her voice choked. "You may, and use the time to think about whether it's worth continuing to pretend to be something you're not." Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now continuing. Maya ran to the second-floor bathroom, where she knew no one would be at that time of the morning. She locked herself in one of the stalls and finally let the tears fall. She wasn't crying from humiliation. She was crying from anger. Anger at being judged not for what she knew, but for where she came from. Meanwhile, in the hallway near the classroom, Susan Collins pushed her cleaning cart. She had worked at St. Jude's Preparatory for 5 years, always invisible to most of the people who passed through. But that morning she had heard every word exchanged between her daughter and the teacher. Susan stopped cleaning and leaned against the wall. Her hands trembled as she held the cleaning cloth. She had sacrificed so much to get that scholarship for Maya. She worked 12 hours a day, cleaning not only the school but also 3 private houses at night. Her only joy was seeing her daughter have the opportunities she never had. "Mrs. Susan." A gentle voice made her look up. It was Simon Reed, 35 years old, the physics teacher who had arrived at the school at the beginning of the year. Unlike the other teachers, he always greeted the staff and knew each of their names. "Professor Simon?" She quickly wiped her eyes. "Sorry, I was just cleaning. Is everything okay? I noticed you seem upset." Susan hesitated. Part of her wanted to tell him everything, to vent about the injustice she was seeing her daughter suffer. But another part was afraid that complaining might make the situation worse for both Maya and herself. "My daughter. She studies here. She has a scholarship." "Maya?" Simon smiled. "Of course I know her. She's one of the brightest students I've ever seen here. Last week she asked me a question about relativity that caught me completely off guard." "Professor Julian doesn't like her," Susan whispered, looking around to make sure no one was listening. "Why do you say that?" "She solved a problem he couldn't properly explain, so today he gave her a different test, with very difficult things. When she finished, he tore up the test and said she had cheated." Simon's face darkened. "He tore up the test?" "In front of the whole class. My daughter left crying." "Mrs. Susan, are you sure that's what happened?" "I heard everything from here in the hallway." Simon took a deep breath. He had known Julian for a few years and had always found some of his methods odd, but he had never witnessed anything so blatant. "Would you allow me to talk to Maya? She's in the second-floor bathroom. But, Professor, please don't tell her I was the one who said anything. I can't lose this job." "Don't worry. I'll find a natural way to bring it up." Simon went up the stairs thoughtfully. Something was very wrong and he couldn't just stand by. He found Maya coming out of the bathroom, her eyes still red despite her attempts to hide it. "Maya, good to see you. I wanted to talk to you about that question you asked me last week." She looked at him confused. "What question, Professor?" About time dilation in special relativity. You asked if a twin traveling at the speed of light would age slower than the sibling who stayed on Earth. Oh yes, she said, trying to smile. I read about that in a library book. Well, I researched it further and brought some articles I thought might interest you. He took some papers from his folder. They're a bit advanced, but from what I see, you don't have problems with advanced material. Maya took the papers carefully, as if they were made of gold. Thank you, Professor, but maybe I'm not as smart as you think. Why do you say that? She looked around, making sure they were alone. Professor Julian gave me a special test today. When I finished, he said I had cheated and tore it up in front of everyone. Simon felt a wave of indignation. Maya, tell me exactly what happened from the beginning. She recounted the events of the last 2 days, from the correction on the board to the test torn up that morning. Simon listened to every word, his expression growing more serious with each detail. Can you remember the questions that were on the test? I can remember all of them. I have a good memory for numbers. Would you mind redoing one of them for me? Just so I understand the level he's demanding. Maya pulled a blank sheet from her backpack and began to rewrite one of the questions from memory, along with her solution. Simon followed each step, impressed not only by the complexity of the problem, but by the elegance of the solution. Maya, this is a Calculus 3 question. I only saw this in my 4th semester of college. My grandmother taught me. She has many old books at home. And Professor Julian accused you of cheating on this? He said it was impossible for me to have solved it in my head. Simon carefully put the paper away. Maya, would you trust me to handle this situation? How so? Let me talk to some people, but I need you to keep being the brilliant student you are. Don't let anyone dim your light. 2 weeks passed in relative calm. Julian seemed to have decided to ignore Maya completely, which she considered a small victory. At least she wasn't being publicly humiliated every day. But the peace didn't last long. Class, today we have a special visitor, Julian announced on a Monday morning. Dr. Arthur Sterling, a researcher from the National Center for Advanced Mathematical Sciences, is conducting research on early mathematical talent in United States schools. A tall man, about 40, entered the room carrying a leather briefcase. Good morning, everyone. As Professor Julian said, I'm visiting several schools to identify young people with exceptional potential in mathematics. Maya felt her stomach sink. Something about the way Julian was smiling told her this wouldn't be good for her. Dr. Arthur, Julian continued, as we discussed on the phone, I have a student here who might interest your research. Miss Collins, could you come up front? Maya stood up reluctantly, feeling every eye on her. This is Maya Collins, Julian said. She is, how shall I put it, a very special student. She constantly questions established methods and claims to solve advanced problems. The word claims cut Maya like a blade. Julian was planting doubts in the researcher's head before she even had a chance to speak. Interesting, Dr. Arthur said, studying Maya with curiosity. Maya, do you like mathematics? Very much, sir. And where did you learn? Do you take private lessons? No, sir, my grandmother teaches me. She was a math teacher for many years. Ah, I see. He made a note. And what kind of problems do you usually solve? Before Maya could answer, Julian interrupted. Doctor, if I may, I'd like to propose a test. I've prepared some problems I consider suitable for a first-year student's level. If Miss Collins can solve them, she will certainly deserve your attention. He went to the board and wrote 3 questions. Maya read them quickly and felt her heart race. They weren't first-year questions. They were math Olympiad problems, the kind few students in the country could solve. Professor, she said carefully, these questions are very advanced for a normal class. Well, Miss Collins, I thought this type of problem would be simple for someone with your alleged abilities. The word alleged again. Dr. Arthur noticed the tension in the room. Maya, would you like to try to solve one of them? He asked gently. Maya looked at the questions. The first was about number theory, something her grandmother had only mentioned superficially. The second was advanced analytic geometry. The third was about combinatorics. I can try the third one, she said. Of course. Take your time. Maya began to work. The problem was about how many different ways it was possible to arrange a group of people in a line, considering some specific restrictions. She had seen something similar in one of her grandmother's books. She started by writing down the restrictions, then began eliminating the impossible possibilities one by one. With each line she wrote, she felt more confident. 15 minutes later, she arrived at the final answer. "Done," she said. Dr. Arthur checked the calculations carefully. His expression was neutral, but Maya noticed he was impressed. "Correct," he said, "and well developed. Maya, where did you learn combinatorics?" "From my grandmother. She has an old book that talks about it." Julian cleared his throat. "Dr. Arthur, I should mention there is a suspicion that Miss Collins may be memorizing answers from somewhere. We've had previous episodes where she presented solutions that seemed beyond her natural capabilities." Maya felt her cheeks burn. "Professor, I don't memorize anything. I understand the concepts." "Understand?" Julian laughed. "Then explain to me why a freshman girl knows number theory and differential calculus." "Because my grandmother has been teaching me since I was little. Your grandmother is a retired cleaning lady, Miss Collins. She can barely read properly, let alone teach advanced mathematics." The silence that fell over the room was tomb-like. Dr. Arthur looked between Maya and Julian, clearly uncomfortable with the situation. "Actually," a clear voice cut through the silence, "my grandmother graduated in mathematics from Midwest State University in 1978 and taught for 35 years before retiring." Everyone turned to see Martha Collins standing in the doorway, holding a yellowed folder. "Grandma," Maya whispered, feeling relief flood her chest. "Sorry to interrupt," Martha said, walking slowly into the room. "I'm Martha Collins. I received a message that there was a researcher here interested in mathematical talent, and I thought you might like to see this." She opened the folder and took out a diploma yellowed with age but still legible. "My bachelor's degree in mathematics. And here," she took out another document, "my certificate of specialization in mathematics education. Doctor." Arthur took the documents and examined them carefully. "Martha Collins," he read aloud, "graduated in 1978, final grade 8.7, specialization completed in 1985. Julian paled. "But how can a cleaning lady have a college degree?" Martha finished the question. "Professor, life isn't always linear. I was a teacher, yes, until my husband got sick, and I needed a job with flexible hours to care for him. After he passed away, I was older and could only get cleaning jobs." She turned to Dr. Arthur. "Doctor, my granddaughter Maya is truly exceptional. Since she was 7, she has demonstrated an intuitive understanding of mathematics that I have rarely seen, even in my years in the classroom." "Mrs. Martha," Dr. Arthur said respectfully, "do you still teach?" "Informally. I teach Maya and some children in our community." "And what level is she currently studying?" "We're starting real analysis. She already has a command of basic differential and integral calculus." Julian seemed to have swallowed his tongue. Dr. Arthur took some notes and turned to Maya. "Maya, would you like to participate in a special program for young mathematical talents? It's on Saturdays at the university." Can I? "With your grandmother's and the school's permission, of course," Martha smiled. "It would be an honor. After Dr. Arthur left, taking Maya's contact information, and Julian was left alone with the two women in the room. "Well," he said, trying to regain his composure, "it seems there's been a misunderstanding." "A misunderstanding?" Martha stepped closer to him. "Professor, you publicly humiliated my granddaughter, tore up a test she had solved correctly, and on top of that lied about my qualifications." "I didn't lie. I didn't know you had an education. You assumed. And you know what's worse? You did it in front of impressionable children, teaching them that it's acceptable to disrespect someone because of their social background." Maya watched the conversation in silence, admiring her grandmother's elegance and firmness. "Mrs. Martha, Professor Julian," she interrupted him, "I'm going to make a proposal. You clearly have doubts about my granddaughter's abilities. How about a public test where she can demonstrate her knowledge unquestionably?" "What kind of test?" "A mathematical challenge. You choose the problems, university level if you want. If she can't solve them, we will publicly admit we were wrong and she will change schools. If she can, you publicly acknowledge that she deserves respect." Julian hesitated. Part of him wanted to refuse, but another part was curious to see how far that girl's knowledge went. "And if I accept?" "We'll do it next Friday, in the school auditorium. You can invite whoever you want. Other teachers, parents, students." "Grandma," Maya whispered. "Are you sure?" "I am, my dear. It's time to show everyone that intelligence has no social class." Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now continuing. The news of the challenge spread through the school like wildfire. In 2 days, the entire school community was talking about the scholarship girl who challenged Professor Julian. Opinions were divided. Some students, especially those who had witnessed the humiliations, were secretly rooting for Maya. Others, influenced by comments from classmates like Parker, thought she was getting into unnecessary trouble. Among the teachers, the division was even clearer. Simon Reed had told some close colleagues about the episodes he had witnessed, and a small group began to question Julian's methods. "Diane," Simon said to Anna Paula, the English teacher, and one of the most respected at the school, "have you noticed how Julian treats the scholarship students?" Diane sighed. "Yes, I have. But you know how hard it is to confront a colleague, especially one who has been here for so many years. But it's not right. That girl is brilliant, and he's trying to destroy her self-esteem." "I know. And it's not just her. Remember Timothy, who left the school last year? The boy was exceptional in literature, but Julian kept making comments about people who didn't have the proper family culture. So you think we should do something? Simon, this challenge situation might be our opportunity. If the girl really is as good as she seems, it will be hard for Julian to keep denying it after a public demonstration." Meanwhile, in the modest home where Maya lived with her mother and grandmother, preparations for the challenge were in full swing. "Grandma, what if I can't do it?" Maya asked for the 10th time that week. "My dear, you can. I know you can," Martha said, organizing stacks of old books on the kitchen table. "But even if you couldn't, it wouldn't be the end of the world." "What do you mean?" "Maya, you have to understand something. This challenge isn't about proving you're smart. I already know that. It's about dignity. It's about showing that no one has the right to humiliate another person for their background." Susan, who had just arrived from work, joined the conversation. "Honey, I'm scared. What if this causes more trouble? What if they take away your scholarship?" "Mom," Maya took her hand, "I can't live in fear forever. If I don't face this now, it will haunt me for the rest of my life." "Your daughter is right, Susan," Martha said. "And besides, after that researcher's visit, I think our Maya has more options than we imagined." On Thursday night, the eve of the challenge, Maya could barely sleep. She lay in bed reviewing formulas, theorems, solution methods, but around 2 in the morning, she felt a strange clarity. It wasn't about the formulas, it was about something bigger. On Friday morning, the auditorium at St. Jude's Preparatory was more crowded than at any recent event. Curious parents, teachers, students from various classes, and even some staff had managed to get some free time to attend. Dr. Arthur Sterling had also returned, interested in following the development of the situation. Julian entered the auditorium carrying a briefcase, followed by Maya and Martha. The silence that fell was almost reverent. "Good morning, everyone," said the principal, Dr. Victoria Prescott, who had decided to mediate the event. "We are here today for an academic demonstration. Professor Julian has prepared some problems that student Maya Collins will attempt to solve." "Dr. Arthur," she addressed the researcher, "would you also like to evaluate the problems to ensure impartiality?" "Of course," he replied. Julian approached the large whiteboard that had been prepared especially for the occasion. "I will prepare 3 problems of different levels," he announced. "The first will be of an advanced high school level, the second of a first-year college level, the third of a graduate level." He began writing the first problem. It was about complex trigonometric functions, definitely beyond what would be expected from a first-year student. "Problem number 1, he said. "Solve and simplify the trigonometric expression." Maya approached the board. Her movements were calm, almost meditative. She began analyzing each term of the expression, identifying patterns. "May I use trigonometric identities?" she asked. "Of course." She began to work, applying identities that transformed the complex expression into something simpler. With each line, the problem became more manageable. 10 minutes later, she had arrived at an elegant, simplified answer. Dr. Arthur checked the work. Correct and well developed. A murmur of approval ran through the auditorium. Julian, his forehead slightly sweaty, wrote the second problem. It was about limits and continuity, concepts normally only seen in the first year of engineering or mathematics. This time, Maya took a little longer. She spent several minutes just looking at the problem, as if visualizing something no one else could see. "May I use the squeeze theorem?" she asked, "if you can apply it correctly." She began writing the proof, establishing the necessary conditions to apply the theorem, then showing how it led to the desired result. 15 minutes later, it was done. "Correct again," Dr. Arthur confirmed. The auditorium was completely silent. Even Parker had stopped making sarcastic comments. Julian took a deep breath before writing the third problem. It was about vector spaces and linear transformations, topics from advanced linear algebra. When Maya read the problem, for the first time she visibly hesitated. "I'm not sure about this one," she admitted. "I can try, but I can't guarantee I'll succeed." "Try," Martha said softly from the audience. Maya spent nearly 5 minutes just thinking, looking at the problem from different angles. Then, slowly, she began to write. She established the necessary definitions, identified the relevant properties of linear transformations, and began to build a proof step by step. It was a long process, and at times she would stop, erase something, and start over. But gradually, a solution took shape. 25 minutes later, she put the marker down. "I think that's it." Dr. Arthur approached the board and studied the work for long minutes. His expression was inscrutable. "Maya," he finally said, "you made a small mistake in the third line of the proof." Maya's heart sank. "But," he continued, "you realized the error later and corrected it elegantly. The final result is correct, and the method you used shows a deep understanding of the concepts." The auditorium erupted in applause. Maya felt her legs trembling and had to lean on the board. Julian was pale. He looked at the 3 solved problems, then at the 15-year-old girl who had solved them, then back at the problems. "How?" he murmured. "How what, Professor?" Martha stood up in the audience. "How does a freshman girl solve advanced linear algebra?" "The same way any intelligent and dedicated person would solve it," she replied. "With study, practice, and proper guidance." Dr. Arthur addressed the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen, we have just witnessed something exceptional. In my 15 years researching mathematical talent, I have rarely seen such an impressive demonstration of conceptual understanding." He turned to Maya. "Maya, I would like to extend a formal invitation. There is a special program at the university for gifted young people. You could take advanced mathematics courses on weekends, and if all goes well, even begin your undergraduate studies before finishing high school." "That would be amazing," she managed to say. "But before anything else," Dr. Arthur turned to Julian, "Professor, would you like to say something?" Julian stood up slowly. The entire auditorium looked at him, waiting. He began and stopped. "I apologize." His voice was low, almost inaudible. "Miss Collins, I made a serious mistake. I let my prejudices cloud my judgment, and that is unforgivable in an educator." He turned to face the auditorium. "I also apologize to all of you. A teacher should inspire and encourage their students, not humiliate them. I failed in my most basic mission." The silence that followed was different from the previous ones. It was not tense, but thoughtful. Maya looked at the teacher who had caused so much distress in the past weeks. She could see he was genuinely shaken. "Professor Julian," she said, "everyone makes mistakes. The important thing is to learn from them." "You are more generous than I deserve," he replied. Martha approached the stage. "Professor, if I may make a suggestion, how about we use this experience for something positive? How so? I know several brilliant children in my community who don't have access to quality education. Perhaps you could help teach them basic math as a way to give back. Julian looked at her in surprise. You would offer me that opportunity after everything I did? Professor, everyone deserves a second chance, especially when they show genuine remorse. 6 months later, the math mentoring project in the community where Maya lived was in full swing. Julian went there twice a week, teaching basic concepts to children who had never had access to quality education. At first, it was difficult. The children viewed him with suspicion, and he himself felt uncomfortable stepping out of his comfort zone. But gradually, both he and the children grew accustomed to each other. Professor Julian, said a 10-year-old boy named Leo, why is math important? Well, Leo, Julian replied, thinking carefully about the answer, math teaches us to think logically. It helps us solve problems, and it can also open doors to a better future. Like it did for Maya. Exactly like it did for Maya. Maya, who now attended university classes on Saturdays and was already being considered for international math programs, still visited the project regularly. How are you feeling? Simon Reed asked her during one of these visits. Much better, she replied. It's still strange sometimes seeing how people treat me differently now that they know I'm smart. But I'm learning that says more about them than about me. And Professor Julian? He's changed a lot. At first I was angry with him, but now I see he was also a prisoner of his own prejudices. When he started questioning them, he managed to become a better person. Simon smiled. You're very wise for a 15-year-old. I think it comes from my grandma. She always said wisdom has no age, just like intelligence has no social class. At school, the atmosphere had also changed. Maya's story had spread, and she had become a kind of symbol that talent can come from anywhere. Parker, the boy who had teased her the most, approached her one day during break. Maya, he said, looking uncomfortable. Hi, Parker. I wanted to apologize. For the stupid comments I made. I had no right. Thank you for apologizing, that means a lot. Can you teach me some math? I'm struggling in Professor Simon's class. Maya smiled. Of course. Everyone deserves a chance to learn. During lunch, she began helping not only Parker, but other classmates who were having difficulties. She discovered she enjoyed teaching, that she had a knack for explaining complex concepts simply. Have you ever thought about being a teacher? Diane asked one day, seeing Maya explaining literature to a group of classmates. I have. But I also want to do research, to discover new things. I don't see why you couldn't do both. 1 year after the famous challenge, Dr. Arthur Sterling returned to St. Jude's Preparatory for a follow-up visit. How is Maya's progress? He asked the principal. Exceptional. She's taking sophomore-level college courses at 16 and maintaining excellent grades both there and here in high school. And the school environment? Completely transformed. That episode made us rethink many practices. We've implemented diversity and inclusion training for all teachers. And Professor Julian? He's become a different man. The work in the community changed him. Now he's one of the most beloved teachers by the students. Dr. Arthur smiled. Sometimes the best changes come from the most difficult situations. In the late afternoon, he found Maya in the library, surrounded by advanced math books. How is the young researcher? Good. I'm working on a project about fractals. It's fascinating how infinitely complex patterns can arise from simple rules. And plans for the future? I want to finish high school next year and complete an undergraduate degree in math. Then, maybe a doctorate. But I also want to stay involved with community education. Following in your grandmother's footsteps. In a way, yes. She taught me that knowledge only has value when it's shared. Martha approached them, carrying a cup of coffee. Dr. Arthur, so good to see you again. Mrs. Martha, how are you? Well, thank you. Proud of my granddaughter, of course, but also happy to see how all of this has had a positive impact on the community. How so? The mentorship project has grown a lot. We now have 6 volunteer teachers, and several of the children have earned scholarships to private schools. One of them was just accepted into the university's Young Talents program too. That's wonderful. And the most important thing, Martha continued, is that it's breaking down barriers. People are starting to understand that potential exists everywhere. It just needs opportunity. 2 years had passed. Maya, now 18, had finished high school and was in her 3rd year of mathematics at the university. Her research on fractals and non-Euclidean geometry was gaining international attention. She had also founded a non-profit called Math for Everyone, which offered free mathematics education in low-income communities across the state of Illinois. Julian, who had become one of the non-profit's main collaborators, was preparing a presentation on inclusive teaching methods when Maya entered his office. "Professor, can I speak with you?" "Of course, Maya. Always." She sat in the chair across from his desk. "I wanted to thank you." "Thank me? For what?" "For giving me the opportunity to prove my worth, for teaching me that I can overcome any obstacle." Julian smiled sadly. "Maya, I humiliated you, I disrespected you, I almost destroyed your self-esteem." "That's true, but you also taught me something important, that other people's opinions of me don't define who I am, and that even the people who hurt us can change. You are extraordinary, not just in mathematics but as a person." "I learned from the best people," she said, thinking of her grandmother and her mother. 3 months later, Maya was standing on the stage of the university's main auditorium, wearing a black gown and holding a diploma. "Maya Collins," the dean announced, "graduating in mathematics with honors, at 18 years of age." The auditorium erupted in applause. In the front row, Martha was crying with emotion, holding Susan's hand, who also couldn't hold back her tears. Behind them, the entire class from St. Jude's Preparatory had come for the graduation. Parker was shouting, "Way to go, Maya," as if it were a football game. Julian was there too, proud of the girl he had learned to respect. Simon was filming everything, documenting the historic moment. Dr. Arthur, who had become Maya's official mentor, smiled from the audience. After the ceremony, during the graduation party, Maya approached the microphone for her speech. "When I was little," she began, "my grandmother told me something I never forgot. Knowledge is the only treasure no one can steal from you." She looked at Martha in the audience. "During my journey, I discovered that is true, but I also discovered something more. Knowledge only becomes a true treasure when it is shared." She paused, letting her gaze sweep across the audience. "Many of you know my path here wasn't easy. I faced prejudice, disbelief, humiliation. There were times I wanted to give up. But I learned that our origin does not determine our destiny, that intelligence has no color, no social class, no zip code, and that we all have a responsibility to open doors for those who come after us." The applause was long and enthusiastic. After the party, the family gathered at the house where it had all begun. The same kitchen table where Martha had taught Maya her first mathematical concepts was now covered in flowers and congratulatory cards. "Grandma," Maya said, "what do you feel when you look at all this?" Martha smiled. "Pride, of course, but mostly hope. Hope that your story will inspire other children to believe in themselves. And now, what are the plans? I'm going to do my master's right here, but I also want to expand the non-profit. We want to bring quality math education to at least 100 communities in the next 5 years." Susan, who had stopped working as a cleaner to help manage the non-profit, joined the conversation. "Honey, sometimes I still can't believe all of this is real. Mom, you sacrificed so much for me to get here. I'll never forget it. You don't need to repay me anything. Seeing you happy and making a difference in other people's lives is already more than I could have dreamed of." 5 years later, the Math for Everyone non-profit had become a national reference in inclusive education. Maya, now a doctor at 23, had published 3 articles in international scientific journals and was about to leave for a postdoctorate at Princeton. But before traveling, she made sure to visit St. Jude's Preparatory one last time. The auditorium was full again, but this time for another special occasion, the launch of a full scholarship program for students from low-income communities inspired by Maya's story. "It's an honor to be here again," she said into the microphone. "This place gave me so much. A quality education, true friends, and also the challenges that made me grow." In the audience, she saw familiar faces. Julian, now the school's inclusion program coordinator, Simon, who had become vice principal, Diane, who had developed a community literature project inspired by Maya's mathematical work, and in the front row, her eternal pillars, Martha, at 73, still sharp and engaged, and Susan, now the non-profit's executive director. When I left here a few years ago, Maya continued, I promised I would come back to say thank you, but today I realize I didn't come just to thank. I also came to make a new promise. She looked directly at the camera that was live streaming the event. I promise that wherever I go, I will carry with me the responsibility to open doors, to show that talent knows no borders, and to never forget where I came from. After the event, she found Julian in the hallway. Professor, thank you for always being there. Maya, you're the one who taught me the greatest lesson of my career. You taught me that being an educator is much more than transmitting knowledge. It's recognizing and nurturing the potential in every student. And you learned the lesson well. How many children have you helped through the non-profit? More than 500 directly, and they are spreading the knowledge to their families and communities. The impact is multiplied. That's what I'm most proud of, Maya said. Not my degree or my articles. It's knowing that our story inspired real change. On the last day before traveling to Princeton, Maya went to visit the project in the community where she grew up. The space had grown a lot. It now occupied an entire building, with equipped classrooms, a library, a computer lab, and even a small multi-sport court. Leo, the boy she had met 3 years earlier, now 13, ran to greet her. Maya, are you really going to the United Kingdom? Yes, I am, Leo, but it's only for 2 years, and I'll come back with even more knowledge to share with you. I want to go to college too. Professor Julian said if I keep studying, I might get a scholarship. I'm sure you will, you're very smart. Just like you were at my age? Maya laughed. Leo, you are you. You have your own talents, your own story. The important thing is to never stop believing in yourself. That night the family gathered for the farewell dinner. The table was abundant, very different from the simple dinners of years past, but the love and togetherness were the same. Grandma, Maya said, I want you to know that everything I achieved was because of you. You gave me not just knowledge, but wisdom and values. My dear, you always had all of this inside you. I just helped it blossom. And, Mom, she turned to Susan, thank you for never giving up, for believing in me even when I doubted myself. Honey, you are my greatest achievement. No matter how many titles you have, you will always be my brave little girl. 2 weeks later, Maya was at Princeton, walking through the historic halls of the university. But she carried in her luggage more than books and clothes. She carried a mission. On her first day of orientation, when she introduced herself to the group of postdoctoral fellows from all over the world, she said, I'm Maya Collins, from the United States. I'm here to learn as much as I can about advanced mathematics, but also to show that talent can come from anywhere. I come from a poor community, daughter of a cleaning lady, granddaughter of a retired teacher. And if I'm here today, it's because many people believed in me when I needed it most. One of the students, a German young man, asked, And what do you intend to do with the knowledge you gain here? Return to the United States and keep building bridges. Bridges between science and society, between academic knowledge and community education, between what is and what can be. 2 years later, Maya returned to the United States with an even more impressive resume, but mainly with an international network of collaborators interested in inclusive education projects. The reception at the Chicago airport was emotional. Hundreds of people were there, students from the non-profit, teachers, former high school classmates, journalists, and of course her family. Martha, now 75 years old, waited in the front row with a bouquet of flowers. Welcome back, Doctor, she said with tears in her eyes. Grandma, now we begin the most important work. What? To prove that our story wasn't a fluke, that we can replicate this for thousands of other children. 6 months later, Maya had founded the National Institute for Mathematical Education Equity, headquartered in Chicago with branches in 10 U.S. states. The project had gained international attention, receiving funding from foreign universities and organizations focused on education. Julian, who had become the Institute's pedagogical director, now worked full-time developing inclusive teaching methodologies. "Maya," he said during a meeting, "sometimes I think you saved me more than I almost destroyed you." "Professor, we saved each other. You taught me about resilience. I taught you about empathy. Together we are teaching hundreds of children that they can be whatever they want." Simon, who had taken a leave of absence from school to work at the Institute, was developing teaching materials when he received an exciting call. "Maya!" he shouted, running down the hallway. "You need to see this." "What is it?" "Leo, that boy you met in the project, just got accepted into university, full scholarship for engineering." Maya sat in her chair and cried. "Why are you crying?" Simon asked, concerned. "From joy. He is the proof that it works, that we managed to break the cycle." Leo was just the first of many. In the following years, dozens of children who had gone through the Institute's projects secured university scholarships, many of them in STEM fields. Martha, despite her advanced age, remained active at the Institute, developing teaching methods for children with learning difficulties. "Grandma," Maya said one Sunday morning as they had coffee together, "don't you get tired?" "Of what, dear?" "Of teaching. You've been doing it for over 50 years. Martha smiled. "Maya, every child who learns something new is a victory over ignorance and prejudice. As long as I can contribute to that, I will continue. And if one day I become half the educator you are, I'll consider myself successful." "You already are, my dear. You already are." In 2030, 10 years after her return from Princeton, Maya was once again standing on a stage, but this time it was at Lincoln Center, receiving the National Education Award. "This award isn't mine," she said into the microphone. "It belongs to every child who believed they could be more than their circumstances allowed. It belongs to every teacher who saw potential where others saw only lack. It belongs to every family who fought to give their children better opportunities." In the audience, Martha, now 81, watched with pride. Beside her, Susan smiled through tears. Behind them, Julian applauded enthusiastically. At 55, he had become one of the country's leading experts in inclusive education. Simon, now the dean of a community college created by the Institute, recorded everything on his phone. And scattered throughout the audience, dozens of former students from the Institute's programs, engineers, doctors, teachers, lawyers, artists, all united by the conviction that education transforms lives. "When I was a 15-year-old girl," Maya continued, "sitting in a classroom where I didn't feel I belonged, I never imagined I would get here. But I learned that our dreams have no limits when we have the right people by our side." She paused, looking directly at the camera. "To every child watching and wondering if they can go far, yes, you can. To every young person doubting their potential, you are capable. To every teacher wondering if they make a difference, you make all the difference. And to every person who has ever been underestimated because of their background, your story doesn't end where it began. It only begins where you decide it should end." The applause was deafening. But for Maya, the sweetest sound was the proud shout from Leo, now an engineering graduate working as a volunteer teacher at the Institute. "That's right, Professor Maya." That night after the ceremony, the family gathered in the apartment Maya had bought for her mother and grandmother. It was simple but comfortable, with a well-stocked library and a beautiful view of the city. "Grandma," Maya said, helping Martha settle into her favorite armchair, "are you happy?" "I am complete," Martha replied. "I saw my granddaughter become not only a brilliant mathematician, but an extraordinary person. I saw hundreds of children discover their potential. And I saw that the love for education can be passed down through generations. What's the next dream? To see you find someone special and start a family, so that this chain of love and knowledge continues." Maya laughed. "Grandma, you're always thinking about the future." "It's because I'm sure the next chapters of our story will be even more beautiful." And she was right. 2 years later, Maya married Nicholas, an English teacher she had met at Princeton, who had moved to the United States to work at the Institute. The ceremony was simple, held at the Institute itself, surrounded by all the people who had been part of her journey. Julian was one of the people who gave speeches at the reception. "Maya," he said, 15 years ago I almost destroyed your future out of ignorance and prejudice. Today you gave me the chance to help build the future of thousands of children. Thank you for teaching me it's never too late to change." Leo, now 23, and about to start a master's degree in engineering, also spoke. "Professor Maya, you taught me that being smart isn't a gift some have and others don't. It's a choice we make every day. The choice to never stop learning, to never stop questioning, to never stop dreaming." Martha, despite her 83 years, insisted on giving a speech. "My dear granddaughter, you have transformed not only your own life, but the life of an entire generation. May your family continue this mission of spreading knowledge and love throughout the world." End of story. Now tell us what you thought of this story and where you are watching from. If you have something to share with us, leave a sincere comment. Do you believe Maya made the right decisions? We would love to read your opinion. Thank you so much for joining us. Don't forget to leave your like and, most importantly, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss other moving stories.